Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan from the Leather Elves, and I'm here with Jack Pine from High Redbird. Hey, Jack, how's it going?
It is going all right. We are actually starting to get some cold weather. Of course, where I live, we don't get a gradual decline to cold weather. We get hot, 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 cold and rainy, then it's cold.
Yeah, we went from what you would probably call cold to frigid, 27 at night. So yeah, I can understand that change, I guess. It's all relative, right?
Exactly.
So tonight we're going to talk about understanding zoo conservation projects, but I guarantee that we have reminders.
Yeah. So we do want to remind everybody, we do these sessions every single Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I want to repeat that. We do them at 7 p.m. Eastern. Pay attention to that since we are about to hit a time change with daylight savings time. So even if you live somewhere where your time doesn't change, ours does. So pay attention so you don't miss out. If you like the Leather Elves page on Facebook, you are going to get a notification whenever we start a live stream. That way, you won't miss out on any of the fun. But in the event that you are busy, that you need to see those videos somewhere else, we do have all of those videos available. You can rewatch them on the Leather Elves Facebook page, the High Redbird Facebook group, but they're also going to be on the High Redbird YouTube channel. We've actually compiled all of the flock talks that we have done into a single playlist so you can binge watch the entire thing. And I'm going to be honest, I stopped doing the math on how many hours we have of content available over there. I am reasonably certain at this point we are at over 50 hours of content in that playlist. So you can definitely go if there's any topics that we have covered in the past that you would like to revisit. You can, of course, go and visit that. Now, we do a new session every single week. If you'd like to know what we are covering in our sessions, again, those Facebook groups are going to be a great source of information, but also our Instagram pages. You can follow the Leather Elves or High Red Bird or both on Instagram. We're going to share that information on the topics we're covering so you always know what to expect. Robin also shares a ton of fun enrichment photographs, different videos. I share a lot of baby animals because I am competitive and I want more people to like my stuff than Robin's. So you can definitely go and check those out in both of those places. Now, we do also want to remind people since we are both on the board of directors for the National Parrot Rescue and Preservation Foundation, we pretty much have to announce Parrot Festival. If you have not already gone to check it out, we strongly encourage it. You can visit www.parrotfestival.org, scan the QR code that is on your screen. It is a 3-day educational conference based in Houston, Texas, where you can see speakers from all around the world, experts in their field discussing various topics that relate to the keeping of companion parrots. So, topics like veterinary care, enrichment, diet, housing, conservation projects, all of those things are going to be covered at Parrot Festival. Like I said, it is an educational conference, but most of our attendees also say that it is a vacation because it is a lot of fun. We strive to make a fun uh, 3-day event with a lot of activities that you can partake of. The camaraderie is definitely one of the best parts. So, again, visit www.parrotfestival.org to find out more about that. Now, there are some other
We
really fun things. Oh, what's going on, Robin?
Just one more thing about Parrot Festival, Jack. We have a
Okay.
Parrots 101 at Parrot Festival. So if people may be hesitant that, oh, I'm really new to this, I'm new to the parrot world, and we do offer that as well, and it's pretty comprehensive. And the person who presents it is pretty amazing. Wow. So
No, no,
it's
no.
just
So
another thing for people to think about for Parrot Festival.
Yeah, we did the Parrots 101 session. It's a 1 day session. So there's a variety of different topics you can cover in 1 day. If you don't have the full time to invest in a 3 day educational conference, if you've never been to Parrot Festival and you don't know what to expect, that is a great introduction to it. You can cover a variety of different topics. You get access to a vendor hall with vendors from all around the country. So it is a lot of fun. And yes, Robin, you're right. Parrots 101 is a great way for people who are new to Parrot Festival. And the person who teaches Parrots 101, I guess she's all right.
Thank you. I would
Now, a couple
curtsy
of
if I
fun,
had a full screen.
they can't see that on the screen.
I
So just
said
tell them
if
you
I
did
had a full
curtsy.
screen. I did. I curtsied. Did you see it?
Uh, I was going to say, I would curtsy if I still had cartilage in my knees. Uh,
It's
oh,
Santa.
oh, okay. So this is a
Hello,
great time to talk
Santa.
about. So we do have some fun things coming up just in time for Christmas. One of the things that the Leather Elves has put together is the Avian Advent Calendar. So this is 25 days of parrot toy parts. Every single day, you get to open a brand new box, get brand new parts to build a brand new toy for your bird. If you do not know how to build toys, if you don't know what you should be making with all of those toy parts, I am actually putting together 25 days of video tutorials. Every single day, you'll be able to see we open up a box, look at the toy parts that we have, and we are going to build a brand new toy every single day. Robin and I worked on this together. The goal is one, to provide your bird with a ridiculous amount of toys. We are going to have at least 25 toys that you will be able to build. Um, the other goal here is to help with your skills as a toy maker. So knowing how to put different things together, utilize those different parts. It's going to be a great option. It is a great value. So we definitely encourage you guys to check that out. That is going to be available over on the Leather Elves site. And Robin, I think you also have a special announcement going on right now.
We do. We have a Bogo sale going on, and it makes more work for me, but it's better for you and your birds. So, no codes necessary between now and November 30th. You can go to the Leather Elves site, theleatherelves.net, and just order whatever you want, and I will send you two of what you've ordered. It does exclude seasonal items and the skewer kits and donations. There's a donation section, the Be a Rockstar section. Those are excluded from the sale, but it's a really great value for you, and you can stock up now.
Yeah,
All right.
so a lot of fun things coming up, a lot of great options for looking forward to Christmas, looking forward to the new year.
So this is another promotion we've been working on at the Leather Elves, that you can start off the new year by winning free toys for a year. Any orders that were placed, and I think we started back in June or July, and any orders that are placed that are 50, I believe it's, I can't read it, it's tiny, that are $50 or more, get entered into a drawing, and we will have a random drawing at the beginning of the year, and it's free toys for a year, so a toy a month. And the size is, dependent on you guys, whatever kind of bird you have, we will make sure that it's appropriate for them. All right. So it's 8 o'clock.
Right.
No. So those are our reminders for tonight. But the topic for tonight is really, it's so interesting. It's about conservation programs. And Jack and I have both worked with zoos over the years, and conservation, people will say, "Oh no, I don't like zoos, it's just caged animals." Well, there's so much more to it than that. Don't you think so, Jack?
Yeah, so first of all, there's no way we can get into this topic without addressing the fact that not all zoos are created equal. There's
Right.
definitely a difference between uh, AZA accredited institutions, AZA being the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which in terms of animal care typically provides what would be called the gold standard for various aspects of animal care. Those are going to be different from, roadside zoos, small attractions, which maybe aren't providing the best possible care. They maybe aren't providing the best possible conservation and educational messaging. So just make sure that you pay attention to the fact that not all zoos are going to be created equal. If you have a particular zoo that you are thinking of, we definitely encourage you guys to research them, because they should be willing to share that information with you about what is their educational programming, what is their conservation messaging, and how do they support different conservation organizations.
It should be right there. If you're doing research, if you look at their website, all that information should be there. There are some smaller facilities that are not AZA accredited that do an incredible job. And I think, it's really, you guys are smart enough to know which facilities, you go to the website, you check it out. Maybe if you still have questions, you call them, their guest services, and see, if they can answer those questions for you. But it's definitely, it's important to look at what are they doing as far as the bigger picture is concerned. The ones that are iffy, it's, here are our animals and that's it. And it's like, well,
Right.
do you do anything else? So, we're talking about conservation tonight. And one of the things Jack and I wanted to bring up was that AZA accredited zoos need to participate, not need to, they have to participate in conservation projects in order to maintain their accreditation.
Right. And for anyone who is not aware, AZA accreditation is the reason it's called the gold standard is if you are thinking of anything that you want to do with your animals, looking at things like the certifications, looking at things like the requirements for different organizations for different certifications, they will typically require either a long list of different things or AZA accreditation, because AZA accreditation is a higher standard than what those basics are going to be. If you're looking at something like USDA or any other federal permits that you may need for your animals, if you just for housing your animals, using them for education, if you need to transfer those animals. Again, that AZA accreditation is important. For a lot of zoos that are owned by cities, uh, their grants are going to be dependent on that AZA accreditation. So having the money to give to other projects, to conservation projects and things like that, part of that comes from the city and is based on that AZA accreditation.
Absolutely. And I've worked with both types of facilities, and I don't know, I think you have as well, right? Have you worked in a and it's really about how that messaging occurs and how, people who are coming to your facility are understanding the whole mission of what you're trying to get across. And AZA spells that all out for you when you go to seek accreditation. And it's not an easy process either. I mean, you
Oh,
can ask anybody that works in an AZA accredited zoo. You probably don't, if you know anybody that does, don't call them the week of accreditation or the month before, because it's ridiculously stressful. It's, I get phone calls about, their enrichment programs, their and how, how can we tweak this? How can we fix that? And it's really, I mean, it's so detailed and so intense that when you go to an AZA accredited facility, know that that facility, those people have gone through rigorous inspection.
Yeah, and when it comes to conservation programs and conservation messaging with a zoo, um, there's a lot of different ways that that is utilized and worked into the zoo's programming, their general protocols for how they operate. So we wanted to cover tonight a couple of different ways that zoos work with conservation, different ways that you, as not conservation biologists, can still help those zoos work on those different programs, because some of them may not even be things that you would think of, but there are definitely a ton of different ways that you can help different organizations.
All right. So we do have a guest this evening, and Jack and due to some time zone constraints, we don't have her live. She's in a completely other different part of the world than we are right now. So we were able to get together with her via Zoom. You got to love technology, and Nick, you should be so proud of us. We did this on our own, but then Nick had to edit it. So,
Yeah.
so Nick, can we play that? This is Jack. Do you want to talk a little bit about Hannah before we do that?
Yeah. So our first guest or our guest tonight, is Hannah Bailey. She has been working in zoos, working actively in conservation programs for decades at this point. She was actually the curator of birds at the Houston Zoo and hired me for my first zoo job. So I've had the ability to work directly with her, for a number of years. Again, I'm not telling y'all how many because nobody gets to know how old I am. But she is a wealth of knowledge and very, very passionate when it comes to the different projects that she is working with. And she is actually working with quite a few different projects that she does talk about. So I would say, without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce Hannah Bailey.
My name is Hannah Bailey. I am a born and bred native Texan who has spent much of my professional life working for the conservation of birds. While I work worldwide, I've specifically concentrated on a Texas bird for the last 25 years called the Atwater's Prairie Chicken. And I am just a passionate conservationist. I've worked mostly in the zoo world, but I have another couple of projects that I work on that are for nonprofits, specifically with working in the Pacific Islands to translocate birds that might be under threat from introduced and invasive species.
Okay, so that's Hannah, and our conversation with Hannah was great. It was just she's a wealth of knowledge. So you guys will see as we go, forward with this tonight. But so we wanted to talk about how does a zoo help with conservation? So, it doesn't make sense. The animals are all, in human care in a facility. How is that helping conservation? So, Jack, what comes to mind when you think about how zoos help with conservation?
Well, I don't think that's a fair question to ask me since I've worked at a zoo and had to help in just about all of those ways. But I do want to point out, if you guys have any questions about any of the things, we did break up the interview into digestible chunks, because if you have any questions that aren't covered in the interview, please let us know. Me and Robin would both be happy to answer those questions. Um, there are a lot of things that happen with zoos that they do to contribute to conservation efforts. And I would think one of the most obvious is they directly help with conservation efforts. Normally we think of, oh, there's got to be a biologist that's working on conservation, and yes, sometimes that is exactly what they are doing, actively working with different species, whether they are a endangered species local to that zoo or aquarium, or if there is a species that is represented in the animals in their animal collection that they want to work to get people interested in. Having an ambassador animal at your zoo definitely helps get people interested in a particular species. But direct conservation is probably the easiest way to see that zoos contribute to conservation.
I have to admit, I was looking at Facebook before we went live, and a friend who is I believe her title is Director of Education at the Bronx Zoo, Kathleen LaMattina, posted a conservation piece that in 1907, the Wildlife Conservation Society, which is WCS, and the Bronx Zoo is part of that, they released 15 bison that had been raised at the zoo in Oklahoma. And they moved him to Oklahoma, and it was part of the reintroduction program of the bison to the Great Plains. And if any of you have heard anything about that, it's been wonderfully successful. But it started with zoo conservation, and so there aren't a lot of programs that breed animals in-house and then just kind of drop them in the wild. That's not the best way to impact nature, but it in 1907 it was a great success. So and I think zoos have really evolved in how they do conservation as well.
Right. And the idea that you just breed animals and drop them off, that would not be successful. There are so many things that have to go into raising animals, making sure that they are healthy, making sure that they have the skills that would be needed to survive in a particular environment, making sure they would be released at a time when resources are available for that animal. You can't release an animal, up here in the dead of winter and expect it to know what to do. Especially if that animal has been used to, okay, a person comes over and they give me fresh bowl of food and a fresh bowl of water every single day. Wait, that doesn't happen anymore? And no, that doesn't happen in the wild. So there's a lot of things that go into managing different animals. If you're going to do a release project like that, it is a lot of work. I would go so far as to say it is a logistical nightmare. But the benefit is getting to see these animals back in the wild, getting to see their numbers improving, getting them to see them in places where they should be. And more often than not, it's usually because of human interaction and human intervention that they aren't there. That something happened, decisions were made that maybe eliminated habitat or a food source or damaged their ability to hold their own in their native environment. So I'm actually really excited because, like I said, I started at the Houston Zoo. So the project that we're going to talk about with Hannah in just a minute, the Atwater's Prairie Chicken Conservation Project, is near and dear to me because that is something that we all got to have a hand in. Working with these birds, starting from tiny little hatchlings, which the cheaping that they make is absolutely adorable. To seeing adult birds that are acting like adult birds and getting released with all of those decisions made to make sure that they have the best possible chance for survival. It is absolutely incredible. Now, I do have to say, because whenever Hannah is watching this, because there is that time zone difference. If I do not say this from across the world, she will find a way to throw something at me. The Atwater's prairie chicken is not actually a chicken. It is a species of grouse. Superficially, it looks pretty close to what you would expect with a chicken. It is a ground bird, so it does live on the ground. It has a similar diet, but it is not actually a chicken. It is a grouse.
All right. So, Nick, do we have the video of the project?
The Atwater's prairie chicken is a bird that is not actually a chicken. It's chicken size, perhaps, but it is a grouse. And grouse are a family of birds that are noted for their unique mating behaviors. Atwater's prairie chickens in specifically have what's called a lek mating system, which is an all-female choice system. So really, the girls decide what's going to happen, and the males spend all spring displaying. They have a breeding display that's called booming, and that display is basically to show off to all of the hens to see which male is the fittest, and the hen chooses the male. I will say, when I'm talking about prairie chickens, a lot of times I have used the phrase, if mama ain't happy, no one is happy, because you have to have the hen choose her mate and be happy with her nesting location for you to succeed in breeding these birds for conservation efforts. One of the biggest challenges to the prairie chickens early on in the conservation efforts was that a lot of the booming grounds, the areas where the males would gather to display, had been destroyed. They've been paved over, or, subdivisions built, or it was now a floodplain. So it made it hard because the males didn't have any place to display. Just a little more history about the birds. There used to be about 1 million Atwater's prairie chickens along the Texas coastline. And through the 20th century, we saw a massive decline in those birds. And the majority of the decline was because of urbanization of prairie. And so a lot of people think about, the rainforest is so threatened, or, we got to protect wetlands. Well, prairie is one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world, and it is critical. And I also just like to plug prairie too, because, we all know Houston has a massive flooding problem, and prairie actually helps mitigate flooding. Prairie grass has very deep roots. It absorbs water very quickly. So if we restored more prairie around the Houston area, we would have much less flooding issues.
So, when we were talking to Hannah, one of the things that I mentioned to her is that the booming and, the female choosing is very similar to the way that kakapo breed. And that, when you throw those kind of obstacles at them, like the reduction of habitat, or the loss of the prairie, and with the kakapo it was introduction of a predator, then they have to kind of overcome that and deal with what, in my opinion, is a fairly inefficient breeding system.
Right. And so for the kakapo, they have other challenges that make that breeding system a little bit more inefficient. For
Mhm.
prairie chickens, one of the things to keep in mind, remember, once upon a time, there were over 1 million of these birds. They had a breeding system that was working for them. But by and large, the destruction of that habitat, taking away the ability of those birds to breed, or limiting the ability of those birds to breed, making it so they have to choose. If you don't have all of that grassy prairie that you can breed in, um, you know, maybe you're then trying to attract your mate in short grasses, in lawns of different different subdivisions, which Eva pointed out that that is a very attractive bird, and it definitely is. Male prairie chickens, the way that they display is absolutely incredible. You hear that deep booming, and then the tap 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 of their feet as they're bouncing around. Well, if you do that anywhere that isn't this type of prairie environment, that makes you a very conspicuous target for predators. So there's one more thing that we're facing as a challenge. So there's definitely all of these pieces, and some of them maybe we don't even think about as being an issue that we present. Hannah likes to talk about the need for that prairie environment to help with so many things. It does give the prairie chickens the place where they can breed, where they can safely raise their young. But just for our understanding in the Houston area, that flooding mitigation that can happen with having more active prairie. The problem with people is that we like to put in a lot of concrete. It makes it easy for us to drive, it makes it easy for us to move around. Concrete doesn't absorb water like prairie grasses. If we get a heavy rain, prairie grasses absorb that water really quickly. They actually hold it, they'll put out a surge of new growth, which concrete isn't going to do.
And I think too, we're used to birds that really, a lot of them will adapt. They'll, find a different place to nest, find a different way to nest. And, when you're talking about parrots, but the prairie chickens, and, there isn't that option. It's the high grass, it's the prairie, it's the, not the flat surfaces. And so I think it's something we need to think about. But the positive side of things is this is conservation that can be done in your backyard. It's not, you know, thousands of miles away. Well, it is for me, but, it's not across the ocean. It's not somewhere that, I have to get special shots to go to. Well, that's not really true anymore either, is it? But, so it's something that we can easily have an impact on, and that zoos, the Houston Zoo is doing a fantastic job with this, and it's that cooperation, that partnership that has made it, successful. So when a zoo is doing conservation, it's not just, hey, let's get a couple of birds and we're going to have them breed, and then they'll breed some more, and then those birds will breed some more, and then we'll send them out. That's not even remotely close to what happens. There's so much involved. When you're working on managing a species, any species, it doesn't have to be bird, it can be mammal, it can be, reptile, whatever. There is so much that goes into managing them when they're in human care.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into taking care of these different animals, maintaining them. And for a lot of people, it can seem like a bit of a challenge to understand where they can fit into that. Because, okay, well, somebody else is doing conservation, but what can I do to help? And
Mhm.
with all of these different things that we're going to talk about, the different ways that people are, that zoos are helping these different species. One of the ways that we are going to keep coming back to that you can help, visit your local zoos and aquariums, the zoos and aquariums that are supporting these conservation projects by visiting. Your admission cost is going to be going to that fund to help these various species.
Yeah, and it's not just, oh, it's the entry fee. It does so much more. The zookeepers are the ones that are actively involved in taking care of these animals so that there is that survival. And, it's a little thing, but it's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's definitely more than whatever you take out of your wallet to pay for your entry fee. So there's more, aside from the zookeepers taking care of these animals and making sure they have the proper diet, and that, that their enclosures are well outfitted with, the right substrate, the right enrichment, the right groupings. There's a thing called a stud book, and it it's a document that's really, really important. And people are, oh, there's a stud book for this and blah. But we asked Hannah to kind of explain how a stud book works.
It
Jack,
is. The prairie chickens got down to a low population. The lowest population was 32 animals. And of those 32 animals, we were able to capture the genetics of 19 of those 32. And we did that by bringing in eggs from the wild, from different clutches that we were able to find in the early 90s. So we keep track of the genetics through what's called a stud book. And this is basically a listing of every animal, who their parents are, when they hatched, who they've mated with, what offspring they have. And this helps us keep genetic representation really high. And so we use that stud book to make sure that we're not losing genetics, that we can focus on making sure the genetics are appropriately distributed through the population, that we don't focus on any one single line, and that we are consistently sort of rotating animals in the population that's in conservation breeding programs around so that we can still have all those genetics in the population. One of the neat things about prairie chickens that I've learned over the years is that there are several other species like this. They were never tremendously genetically diverse. And we've learned that by doing genetic analysis on study skins that have been saved in museums. And when we compared the genetics of those historical data that we've gotten to the current population, we have not had a significant loss of genomes or genetic representation. So the stud book helps really well in keeping track of that. And even better because prairie chickens, they can have up to 30 chicks a year. They lay clutches of 12 to 18 chicks. That's a lot of birds to keep track of. So it's nice to have a computer program help us with that. There are stud books for aquatic animals, fish, all sorts of reptiles have stud books, large mammals, tigers, elephants, lions, all the primates, chimps, gorillas, siamangs, even down to pygmy marmosets, It is difficult with some of those species to maintain a stud book because, say like with fish, it's sometimes hard to keep track of an individual, but what you're able to do there is keep track of groups of individuals that are related, and you work with those groups in setting up just different genetic groupings. So it's not taxa specific. It can work for just about anything. One of the big lessons that I think all of us we know, I'm not going to say we've learned it completely yet because we haven't necessarily been able to follow through with this, is that we need to get ahead of the game and not wait till there are 32 of a species left. With the Atwaters, we breed them specifically for replacement of the the breeding population each year, but we also breed them specifically for release. And there's a lot of thought that goes into that release process. How long do they stay in the pre-release pens? Do we offer food to them in the pens post-release? How do we monitor that population once they're let out of the release pens? We do a lot of radio tracking of those animals. They all have collars that fit comfortably over them, over their necks, and that can't be seen. They nestle perfectly in their feather coverage, and so we're able to monitor and see how the birds are dispersing, if they're flocking together, when they're nesting, and we can also use that to determine any threats in the area for any mortalities that might occur.
it's really interesting. After talking with Taylor about genomes and genomics, then listening to Hannah, I kind of want to get them together. I want them to meet and talk about, how they can help one another out, because I think it's kind of interesting. The Like Hannah said, the stud books are for a number of different taxa. It's not just birds. It's not just the prairie chicken. It's across the board. It's something very, very important and essential that zoos do.
Yeah. Managing a stud book is basically paying attention to the entire population of animals. Julie asking whether it's so prairie chickens are protected, they're critically endangered. So, whether it's something like that, or like Hannah said, things like lions, tigers, elephants, you need to pay attention to the overall genetic diversity that is going to be represented in that population and working with those different animals so that we can maintain the greatest genetic viability of that population as we move forward. One of the hardest things when you work at a zoo, because when you are caring about the population and needing to manage those genetics, you have to make sure that you're putting that at the top of your priority list, not your connection to an individual animal. If you go in and you take care of an animal every single day and you like working with this animal, but it's critical that that animal go on a breeding loan to another facility to have offspring. Uh, you have to do that because you have to make sure that you're making those decisions for the long term, not just because you like an individual animal.
Yeah, and it's really important to that we kind of mentioned that zookeepers do have that attachment. There is that attachment, and they do care about the animals. I can tell you, after going to I don't know how many American Association of Zookeeper conferences, that they're hosted by a zoo. And if you went to a facility and somebody worked with, you know, uh, hyacinth macaws, and the hyacinth ended up being moved to another facility. And they showed up at the zoo day, and there's still that attachment. It's still that recognition that happens. But it's it's kind of the greater good. You've got to look at, okay, this is about the species. This is about, it's not about, that specific relationship. It's for the good of the species. And it's tough to understand, if you haven't worked directly with it, it's a little bit difficult to understand, but trust me, there's still that caring that happens.
Right. And that's the really difficult balancing piece that can happen with zookeepers, because to be a zookeeper, you have to have that passion for wildlife. You have to be willing to put that work in because it is physically, mentally, emotionally stressful. Obviously, you're getting up, you're taking care of, you're cleaning animals every single day, but you're also getting attached to them. You're then having to maybe see them go to another facility. You're getting attached to them and then realizing the challenges that that species is facing in the wild, which puts you in a position with that passion you have for wildlife to talk to other people about it. And that is going to be one of the most important things that zookeepers do, that messaging piece, helping people connect with ambassador animals that they can find at their local zoo or aquarium, realizing that that animal connects to a real life population of animals that needs assistance, and pointing out things that you can do to help that species in the wild. That's typically not one of the things that are thought of as a job of a zookeeper. You, most people say, oh, well, you just play with animals all day, which is not remotely the case. Then if you get someone who knows a little bit more about it, they say, okay, well, you feed and water and clean animals all day. And that is getting closer. But that educational piece, that connection piece is what makes all the difference. And that's why for me, doing presentations and working with the public is so important, because I am very much aware that I am only one person. But if I can influence three people on any given day, if I can just influence three people to take a more active role in helping the natural world, in working for those conservation projects, well, there's three more people that are doing it. And the next day, I can maybe get three more people. And the next day. And that progress may seem slow, but it's definitely there. And it's so very important.
I think back to when Keeper Talks, the animal ambassador piece, and zookeepers coming out from behind the enclosures and having to talk to the public. And it was, oh wait, no, that's not what I signed up for, from a zookeeper's perspective. But then I think, as things evolved in zookeeping, it became obvious that it was just a sharing of that passion, and we talk about crazy bird people, right? We're all crazy bird people, crazy parrot people. Use that to your advantage. I mean, a lot of the birds that we keep in our homes are endangered. They may be in need of some conservation projects. I know Dorothy was on earlier, from the bird endowment, and it's really a matter of spreading that message. And as owners of an exotic animal, you can do that as well, and I get, oh, well, I'm not a public speaker. Oh, you don't have to be a public speaker. You can talk to people at a party. We all do that, right? So, you talk to somebody at a party. Thanksgiving's coming up. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, there are going to be people at that table that need to hear about parrot conservation. And that's your opportunity. And they might have some wine. And so it won't matter what you tell them. I mean, it'll matter. They'll remember it. But if the details are a little off, that's okay.
Right. There are so many things that you can do there that are going to help. And you can pick how you want to contribute to that conservation piece. So if you want to actively encourage people to contribute to those conservation projects. Again, Dorothy Patterson from the Bird Endowment, I am sure she would be happy to let you know all of the ways that you would be able to contribute and help the Bird Endowment. But like we were saying earlier, there are so many different things that you can do. And going to your zoo is going to be one of those ways that you can contribute towards any of the conservation programs. And zoos are proud of their conservation programs. So look for the zoos near you, look and see what projects they have available, and maybe encourage, one of your family members, hey, I'd really like a membership to the zoo for this year, maybe as a Christmas present. And then that that's going to be something else that's going to be done to contribute towards those conservation programs.
And, if there are young people in your life, by young, I mean really young, like children level, get them involved, get them excited and passionate about conservation. I used to work with Cub Scouts when my son was little, and we partnered with SaveNature.org. And SaveNature.org did an event called Bowl the Planet. So they had this event where they got pledges for bowling. The kids loved it. And I'll never forget, one of the little boys asked me, so can I go? Because what happens is you end up buying an acre of rainforest or buying an acre of coral reef. And he said to me, can we go there? Can we go camping there? These were Boy Scouts, right? And well, they were Cub Scouts, and they were excited about seeing what they were saving. And the more you can create stewardship in your friends, in your family, in your children, the better off we're going to be. Kathy, it's always a teaching opportunity, and you don't have to shove it down anyone's throat. It's not like, well, you should be doing this and this is that. And don't start out the Thanksgiving dinner conversation with deforestation is happening everywhere. Habitat destruction is running rampant. Because yeah, people are gonna be like, "Oh, pass the stuffing." They don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about the successes. That's the way to do it, to get that message across.
Right. And so one of the things we talked about with Hannah, for a lot of people, that question can be, how can they contribute to, uh, conservation programs? And there are so many different ways that you can contribute, that Hannah has found over, again, decades of working with zoos, working directly with these conservation programs. So I thought it was pretty important that we see what she had to say about that.
For prairie chickens, you can visit the Atwater's Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge page. There's a group called the Friends of the Atwater's Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge, and they do a great deal of work with the prairie chickens, not only helping with the managed breeding program, but also helping with habitat restoration, not only at the National Wildlife Refuge, but through partnerships with private landowners, as well as they help with chick monitoring, fire ant treatment, because fire ants are a problem for prairie chickens, and a lot of other things that just help with the kind of nickel and dime work with these species. If they want to get personally involved, the Atwater's Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge Friends Groups often has volunteer or opportunities to help out. If they want to do something personal that's just closer to home for them, turn their front and backyard into a native prairie, especially in the Houston area. I know some homeowner associations don't particularly like it because they think it looks like weeds, but it's not. It's what's helped the city move forward. And having native prairie grasses in your front and or backyard can help. And it also encourages native pollinators as well.
So if maybe people can't afford it, or they're not in a place, I'm up here in the Northeast, and
Oh yeah,
it's not going to work in my backyard.
yeah.
Just to support conservation in general, Hannah,
Mhm.
what do you think people need to be aware of, or what do they need to be thinking about if they want to? Because we've all got to do some work, I think.
Yeah.
But what kind of things can you suggest to folks who are listening?
I think no matter where you are in the United States or in the world, one of the simple things to do is encourage native flora and fauna from your own area. Whether it be prairie, whether you're in the piney woods somewhere or in the Pacific Northeast, encourage the native flora and fauna in that area. There are simple things we can do that I mean, a lot of people talk about recycling and lessening your carbon footprint. Lessening your carbon footprint is incredibly important, but that means different things to different people. Not every area has recycling. So be a conscious consumer. Think about what you're buying and what the end stage of that will be. Instead of buying the bag of salad, can you find somewhere that you can, like get the handfuls of spinach yourself and put it in a mesh bag instead of that plastic bag? Support your local farmers markets. These are people that are working with the land in a way that is beneficial, and many of them are trying to uh, provide food and services so that you are buying local and not increasing your carbon footprint. So it's a lot of simple things like that. And I mean, I know it's hard. Jack can attest, I am a Diet Dr. Pepper addict. And I struggle with that because I can either get them in plastic or aluminum bottles. And so how do I, aside from trying to drink more water, how do I uh, maintain, my caffeinated needs while still, while still lessening my carbon footprint. So I think that's all a very important thing. But just like even the basic thing, if you have a a windowsill that you put plants on, make those native plants. Make them available to whatever insects or pollinators or animals are coming through, your area. That is critical. So, and I think it's an easy first step too.
Mm-hmm.
Our Prairie Chicken facility, we outgrew space at the zoo. And we lucked out in that our CEO at the time was very good friends with the director of Johnson Space Center.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnson Space Center has, in the middle of it, has a very large native prairie. And he said, we have some space. Do you want to build something down there? And so all of our prairie chickens, our breeding center for prairie chickens was built and is located on Johnson Space Center, which is kind of neat. My prairie chickens are, guarded by armed guards. You have
Nice.
to pass a background check to, go see them. But I mean, aside from all that, one of the most meaningful things that has ever been said to me was after we opened that facility. I'm trying to think, I think it was just like January 2006-ish, we moved birds down there for the first time. And we gave a lot of tours to different people located on Johnson Space Center because they were curious about, what is this big thing that showed up? And one of the groups we gave tours to were the astronauts, because most of them are based out of Houston. That's where most of the astronaut training is done. Mm-hmm. And I was giving a tour to the group of astronauts. It was getting close to breeding season, so a lot of the males were colored up and starting their display. And one of the astronauts, who had been orbiting the Earth on the space shuttle a month earlier, looked at me and said, "This is the coolest job. Y'all are doing some really meaningful and important stuff."
Nice.
I did momentarily think space has done something to your brain. But I mean, in all seriousness, it was eye-opening to me, because a lot of us, and I think everyone in like either a conservation or a zoo related or any sort of care related position, after a while you take it as, oh, this is what I do every day. So it was nice to have that outside perspective from somebody else who does something unreal, just stop and say, you're doing important things and it's really cool. So,
no, that's very cool. And, and I think people do need to think about that too. It's something that a lot of people who aren't in the field can help with. And it's you can be part of that amazing thing that happened, that magic that happens.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is like, especially with the prairie chickens, but with some other species I've worked with, if we weren't doing that, they would be no more. If zoos did not step up to breed and restore the prairie chicken population, which is still a work in progress, they would not be here. And that's true of a lot of species. That's true of the California condor, definitely. Likely true of the whooping crane. There are just a lot of species that is true for, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for having stopped that extinction. So, and once again, we still don't know if we're going to succeed with any of those, but we're going to make darn sure that we are going to give every ounce that we can trying. So.
Well, that sounds like a a worthwhile mission for sure. And I think your point of paying attention to what we are doing, paying attention to different species, and catching things before we get to that point of only having 19 breeding individuals, we can be in a better position to save those animals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of the nice thing is a lot of not only zoos, but agencies that are in charge of those decisions are starting to realize that as well. And so, you know, when they start seeing those sharp declines, there's not so much of the thumb twiddling going, oh, maybe we should do something. There's much more of a push now to say, no, we've seen this road before. We need to act now.
You know, and I think too, it's important that people can also just kind of spread the word that this is something that's a reality. You know, we talk about the dinosaurs and we talk about, you know, extinction, and it's really, I mean, it's happening daily. It's happening in our world. And by talking about it, by, you know, discussing conservation, people who are not working directly in the field can make an impact.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I have to say, there's been some good things about the pandemic for conservation, which I know sounds crazy, because we are all pandemiced out and just can't, you know, we're just, you know, please let it be done. But people have gotten outside more. And the example I like to give of that is, so the Atwater's Prairie Chicken Refuge is located about an hour, 60 miles outside of Houston. And its annual visitorship used to be, I think, maybe 4,000 max. Last year, they had 22,000 visitors. And even though things have opened back up, people have started going back to work, they're still seeing high visitorship. And it's because people were looking for things to do, and they realized there are all these like national wildlife refuges around. So that's another thing I think people can do. Go visit your state parks, go visit your national wildlife refuges, go visit your national parks. You'd be surprised how many of them are close to you. And they are great resources for environmental and species assistance.
So I don't know about you, Jack, but I feel a little bit better about knowing that I can make a difference. And, you know, I think we knew that working with zoos, but I think Hannah really drove home that even as an individual, you can make an impact.
Right. And, you know, again, you don't have to be a conservation biologist working in the field to have that impact on conservation. So hopefully tonight we have shown you a variety of the different ways that zoos contribute to those various conservation programs, but also hopefully shown you a couple of ways that as a person, our one of our friends, Daniel Sigmund, we've had him on here before, likes to use the phrase, I'm just a guy. Well, even if you are just a guy, just a girl, you have the opportunity to meaningfully impact these different conservation programs in a variety of different ways. So you can pick whichever way is appropriate for you. You can use that messaging piece to talk to other people about conservation programs. If you have the ability to donate financially to those organizations, they would be happy for your donation, and use that appropriately. If you're only able to do things like visit state parks, zoos, and aquariums that are contributing towards those conservation programs, you know, you're having a fun day out, but you still are contributing towards those conservation programs. So there's so many different things that you can do, so many ways that you can help. And I think the big takeaway here is there is something you can do. We just need to make sure that we aren't complacent about it. We don't want to hit a point where we're having to make that last minute save on a species because their population has gotten so low. And I think, like Hannah said, being able to go out to witness nature, to interact with it. It inspires that passion that then causes you to care about what is happening around you. So I definitely cannot encourage that strongly enough.
And it may be that one moment. You don't go to the zoo, or you don't go planning, I'm going to come out of this, gung ho on conservation. But maybe you run into the person who's doing the walkthrough animal meet and greet with, you know, pick the insert species here. And all of a sudden you are intrigued by this. So you start doing more research. That's how you become a conservationist. And it's not just, the big money, it's not just the degree behind your name. All of us can work towards that. And I think that's important to remember when we're kind of in a place in the world where things are a little bit bleaker than they have been in the past. And it's something that's positive that you can do that will make a difference.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think we're at the end here. We want to thank you guys. We want to thank Hannah for joining us. And she took time out of what I know is a busy schedule, saving things to meet with us. So thank you, Hannah. We really appreciate it. And if you have questions, anything that came up, if you've got a great idea for something people can do for conservation, let Jack and I know. And we will see you next Friday at what time, Jack?
7 p.m. Eastern.
On Friday Night Flock Talks. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.